Imagine a man standing in a drafty wooden shed in the middle of the night. It is 1957. He is 47 years old. He has no job. He has no money. He has just been released from prison. To his neighbors in Ikeda, Osaka, Momofuku Ando is a washed-up failure who lost everything in the war. But inside that tiny shed, he is mixing flour and water, obsessed with an idea that everyone else thinks is impossible. He does not know it yet, but he is about to invent a $40 billion industry that will feed students, astronauts, and survivors for generations to come. This is the story of how one desperate man turned a bowl of noodles into a global empire. If you want to understand the hidden history of Asian business dominance, hit that subscribe button right now. To understand why a middle-aged man was hiding in a shed, we have to go back to the absolute destruction of Osaka after World War II. The city was flattened, the sky was grey with ash, and the silence of the ruins was only broken by the sound of rumbling stomachs. Japan was starving. The government could barely function, so the real power on the streets belonged to the black markets. Momofuku Ando wasn't always a struggler. Born in Taiwan under Japanese rule, he was a natural entrepreneur. He moved to Osaka as a young man and built a small fortune in textiles and machine parts. He had the golden touch. But war does not care about business acumen. Air raids incinerated his factories. His office turned to dust. When the smoke cleared, all his hard assets were gone. But Ando was resourceful. He pivoted, he started making salt. He tried to help students by providing scholarships. And that is where the trouble began. In 1948, the Allied occupation forces were cracking down on tax evasion. Ando's scholarship payments were flagged. Suddenly, the respected businessman was branded a criminal. He was arrested and thrown into Sugamo prison. For 2 long years, he sat in a cold cell, stripped of his dignity. He watched the seasons change through iron bars, wondering if his life was over. When he was finally released, the stigma of being an ex-convict clung to him like a shadow. He tried to rebuild. He became the head of a credit union, trying to help others get back on their feet. But the post-war economy was volatile. In 1957, disaster struck again. The credit union went bankrupt. Under Japanese law, as the director, Ando was liable for the debt. He had to sell everything: his furniture, his land, his remaining business interests, all gone to pay off creditors. He was back at zero. Actually, he was below zero. He was 47, unemployed, and humiliated. But during those dark days, wandering the rubble of Osaka, he saw something that haunted him. Behind the main train station, there was a black market food stall. A long line of people, shivering in the freezing wind, waited for 20 or 30 minutes just to get a single bowl of hot ramen. They were desperate for warmth. They were desperate for calories. At the time, the Japanese government was flooding schools and workplaces with American wheat, but they were telling people to bake bread. Ando looked at that shivering line and thought, why bread? Asians eat noodles. The cultural disconnect was massive. He confronted officials at the Ministry of Health. They laughed him off. They said the noodle industry was too small, too fragmented, and too unstable to feed a nation. They told him to stick to bread. Most men would have listened. Most men would have accepted their fate and looked for a safe, low-level job to ride out their old age. But Momofuku Ando was not most men. He remembered the look in the eyes of the people waiting for that soup. He realized that food wasn't just about nutrition, it was about comfort. It was about dignity. If the government wouldn't support a noodle industry, he would build one himself. He didn't have a factory. He didn't have a team. He didn't have funding. All he had was a backyard, some scrap wood, and a second-hand wok. He told his wife he was going to make a ramen that could be prepared instantly. She thought he was crazy. The world ignored him. But he walked into his backyard, hammered together a 10-square-meter shed, and locked the door. The obsession had begun. Inside that shed, the reality was brutal. It was barely 10 square meters, smaller than a modern parking space. There was no high-tech equipment, no laboratory staff, and no venture capital safety net. There was just a 48-year-old man, a second-hand wok he found at a scrap market, and 18 kilograms of flour. For an entire year, Momofuku Ando slept 4 hours a night. He didn't take a single day off. He was possessed by a vision that seemed physically impossible. He established 5 ironclad rules for his invention. It had to be tasty. It had to be non-perishable. It had to be cheap. It had to be safe. But the 5th rule was the one that nearly broke him. It had to be ready to eat in exactly 3 minutes. For months, the shed was a factory of failure. The biggest enemy was moisture. To make the noodles last for months, he had to dry them out completely. But how? If he sun-dried them like traditional Ramen noodles, the humid Osaka weather made them rot from the inside out. If he air-dried them with heat, the texture was destroyed. They became brittle and crumbled into dust when boiled. He tried salting them. He tried smoking them. Nothing worked. The shed filled with the smell of rancid dough. His money was dwindling. His wife, Masako, watched him grow thinner and more desperate by the day. Then came the night that changed food history. Ando was in his kitchen, exhausted, watching Masako fry tempura for dinner. He watched her drop the battered vegetables into the hot oil. Sizzle. The moisture in the batter evaporated instantly upon contact with the heat, leaving the coating crispy and full of tiny holes. It was a revelation. He realized that hot oil was not just for cooking, it was a dehydration machine. He rushed back to the shed. He threw a batch of seasoned noodles into the wok of boiling oil. The water inside the dough vaporized instantly. This process, which he called flash frying, did 2 miraculous things. First, it sterilized the noodles and fixed their shape, making them shelf-stable for months. Second, the escaping steam left behind microscopic pores in the noodle strands. This was the secret. Those tiny pores were the gateway. When you poured boiling water over the dry block, the water rushed into those holes and the noodles returned to their original state in exactly 3 minutes. He had cracked the code. On August the 25th, 1958, Chikin Ramen hit the market. The package showed a simple cartoon chicken, but the contents were revolutionary. It was the world's first magic ramen. But there was a massive problem. The price. At 35 yen, it was 6 times more expensive than a fresh bowl of udon, which cost only 6 yen. Wholesalers laughed at him. They said no one would pay a premium for dried food. They were wrong. The convenience factor was a drug. Housewives, construction workers, and students realized that saving time was worth the extra yen. Chikin ramen exploded. It became the status symbol of the new, busy Japan. But success brought a new enemy, the copycats. Within months, the market was flooded with low-quality imitations. Fake brands with similar names tried to steal his thunder. Ando did not just outcook them, he used the law against them. He filed for trademarks and patents on his manufacturing method, turning Nissin into a legal fortress. He sued the imitators into oblivion, establishing that Nissin was the only true original. Drop a comment below if you knew that instant ramen started as a luxury item for the rich before it became a staple for students. By the late 1960s, the domestic Japanese market was saturated. Everyone was eating instant ramen, but sales were plateauing. Ando, never one to settle, looked west. He boarded a plane to Los Angeles, convinced that American supermarkets held the key to the next level of growth. But when he arrived, he saw a problem that threatened to kill his international ambitions before they even started. Americans did not own ramen bowls. They did not use chopsticks. In a Los Angeles supermarket, Ando watched a buyer take a packet of chicken ramen, break the square block into pieces, stuff it into a paper coffee cup, and eat it with a fork. It was a moment of pure clarity. The barrier was not the taste, it was the vessel. If he wanted to conquer the world, he did not just need to export noodles, he needed to export the bowl. Back in Osaka, the obsession returned. Putting hot soup in a portable container was an engineering nightmare. Paper cups could not hold the heat. Glass was too heavy. Ando discovered a new lightweight material called polystyrene foam, a technology used for insulation and never for food. It was perfect, but it created a new problem. If the dried noodle block sat at the bottom of the cup, it would shatter during shipping. Ando's solution was a stroke of architectural genius he called middle suspension. He designed the noodle block to be wider than the bottom of the cup, so it hung suspended in the middle of the container. This created a crush zone at the bottom that protected the noodles from impact. It also allowed hot water to circulate underneath, cooking the noodles evenly. It was a perfect system. In September 1971, CUP Noodle launched, and it flopped. The price was 100 yen, 4 times the cost of a bag of ramen. Wholesalers rejected it. Japanese consumers found it bizarre. In a culture where eating while walking was considered rude, the idea of a standing meal was offensive. It seemed like Ando had finally miscalculated. Then came February 19th, 1972. 5 armed radicals from the United Red Army broke into a mountain lodge in Nagano Prefecture, taking the innkeeper's wife hostage. It was the Asama-Sanso incident. The standoff lasted 10 days in freezing sub-zero temperatures. The riot police surrounding the lodge were starving. Their bento boxes were freezing into solid blocks of ice before they could eat them. Nissin seized the moment. They donated crates of cup noodles to the police. It was the only food that could stay hot in the biting cold. Every television station in Japan was broadcasting the siege live. Millions of viewers tuned in, expecting to see a shootout. Instead, they saw the elite riot squad huddled in the snow, slurping steaming noodles from white foam cups. The steam rising from the cups against the stark, frozen landscape was the most powerful advertisement in history. Viewers called the stations, asking what they were eating. It was the first viral moment in food history. Sales exploded overnight. Cup noodles transformed from a weird novelty into the fuel of the modern Japanese workforce, the salaryman energy source that powered Japan's economic miracle. This success allowed Ando to finally crack the American market. He rebranded the product as Top Ramen and targeted a demographic that needed cheap, hot calories, college students. It became the currency of dorm rooms and the staple of budget living, cementing Nissin as a global icon. From a tiny shed in Osaka to the International Space Station, Momofuku Ando's journey defied every expectation. In 2005, at the age of 95, he unveiled Space Ram, a vacuum-packed noodle for astronauts. He proved that even in the darkest failures, innovation is possible if you just keep watching the customer. Desperation didn't break him, it fueled him. If you want to see more stories of how Asian innovation built the modern world, hit the subscribe button. Tell us in the comments which Asian business dynasty we should investigate next. If you want to know about the Filipino tycoon who built the Philippines' largest malls, watch this video next.